Well, good evening, and thank you, Regina. She was introducing me. I was looking over my shoulder, trying to see who she was talking about. And certainly, that person would be nice to know. But what I thought I'll do this evening is to talk to you briefly about the general view of how the environment affects our health, where we are as a state and as a people within this domain, and also to understand how it is that we can get back to a state of health and well-being by realizing that we are healthiest when we are in synchrony with nature. So, I'm going to forward this. Whenever that comes on. But the basic idea here is, and I would present to you this view about the environment and its impact on health. And if I get too preachy or too professorial, please forgive me because it's a difficult habit to break. If you look at the environment, you understand it as being of many different components. And these components are sort of nested within each other. There is the natural environment, the environment of the night and day cycles, the seasons, the sunlight and the altitude, the natural domain in which the ecosystem in which we all live. And then there's the community environment of friends, our socioeconomic status, our neighborhoods, our sort of built environment, the cities and roads that we built and we live in. And then there's a personal environment that is populated by the choices that we make from the social and community environment that we are in. And each of these domains affect our health significantly. For example, the cycles of night and day, we are all entrained to this primordial cycle. And it's not us, but all animals and all plants are. A large number of our genes are actually, in fact, regulated in a night and day fashion, in synchrony with day and night. We have greater susceptibility to disease in some times of the day than at other times of the day. And if we become dissynchronized with this natural rhythm, that we become sick and ill, and that causes an increase in heart disease, obesity, and diabetes. And this can be found not only in humans, but in animals as well. So there are times of the day we are more susceptible to injury, and other times we are not. So we are entrained to this natural rhythm, and if we divorce ourselves from this, then we have disease and poor outcomes. We're also quite entrained to the seasons. There are times of the year that we are more susceptible to diseases. There are times that we can actually regulate our risk factors better. And all around the world, there are more deaths in winter than in summer. And people believe that this might be due to changes in the seasons, and maybe because it's cold and people stay indoors. But even in places like Los Angeles, where there is no winter, there's still more deaths in winter. So we can see that that our health is inextricably aligned to nature. But one of the most important aspects of nature is sunlight, and we are also like plants. The plants are photosynthetic in the sense that they make glucose from sunlight and air. And we do the same. We synthesize vitamin D from sunlight, and we regulate a range of our metabolic processes depending upon where we are in the sunlight. So we are entrained and we are adapted to certain amount of sunlight and to each particular level of the latitude, and depends upon where we are, that we are whether in synchrony or not in synchrony with the natural environment we are in. We are like plants that thrive only in specific conducive environments. People who live in strange environments like high mountains have adapted to those mountains and live there where other people go there would find it difficult to live. People with old ancestry, for example, the Tibetans, have adapted to their environment where others have not. And one of the sort of paradoxes of modern civilization is that we have changed so rapidly that we have lost synchrony, or we are not in sync with nature, and we have not evolved to adapt to this new environments that we have created around us. And that seems to be the major source of disease and dysfunction in modern societies. But more important than the natural environment to us and human is our cultural environment and the social networks we are in. And this is the example of the spread of obesity in social networks. And as you can see that there's clustering, that you can see the yellow parts clustering, which means that People who are more obese tend to stay with more obese people. People who are less obese or thin stay with thin people. And this segregates over time. And part of our habits of eating, of behaving in certain fashions, of making food choices, or making personal choices like smoking depend upon the social network we are in. So we are not individual free entities floating around which is totally self-determined, but part of this large social network from which we derive our identity and meaning. And in this network, we have created around ourselves a world that is becoming increasingly more polluted. We have managed to pollute every single aspect of the planet. In the recent analysis, there wasn't 1 square mile of pristine Earth left in the entire planet. Even if you go to the remote parts of Antarctica or the Arctic Circle, you will find traces of lead and cadmium and plastics. So we have managed to contaminate and pollute the whole planet, and we are paying a dear price for that. And if you look in the United States alone, you can see that the highest levels of air pollution, and this is shown here in the red, are in some of the areas where we live, and we bear the brunt of it. Louisville is a warm, loving, caring, compassionate, vibrant city, but we have one of the highest levels of air pollution in the world. We are number 10 most polluted city in the United States, and that's part because of a geography and because of a history. And that leads to greater death and disease. And as you can see here, areas which have high levels of pollution have higher levels of disease or have higher levels of diabetes and obesity. And then we have to work collectively to overcome this legacy and this burden of disease that is inordinately sort of given to us in the Ohio Valley. But overall, in the end, we are as people who are determined by the sum of our choices, and if we make the right choices, things like heart disease, for example, cardiovascular disease or diabetes could be easily avoided. And these choices populate our being, and even though they may not show any external signs, wrong choices bring to us a sort of increasing burden of disease that could have devastating consequences over time, or at least in one catastrophic event such as a heart attack or a stroke. So I will end here and with the idea that disease is not something that originates entirely in a person, and health is not something that we can entirely create for our own, but it is something that we get from the environment. And if we live in healthy, conducive environments, then we can live healthy and active lives. Thank you.